Hello, Aubrey. How's it going today? How you
I'm
feeling?
great. I'm great, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm feeling good. Hey, Aubrey, has anything strange happened to you lately?
Straight. Yeah. The other night, I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard someone come in. It was like 4 a.m.
Ooh,
And usually we're all like asleep. No one's usually getting home at 4 a.m. And I heard the
no.
door open, someone come in. So that was
Well,
strange.
who
Turns
was
out it was
it?
my daughter. She
Oh
totally
my
broke
gosh.
curfew and came
4,
home late.
4 a.m. Jeez.
She's
Whoa.
18 now. So it's a little tricky. It's like, should she have a curfew? I don't know.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. If my door opened at 4 a.m., I'd be freaking out.
Yeah.
Like, is there a
Like, what?
burglar? What's going on?
Exactly, right?
Mm.
Panicked.
Okay, so that happened to you. Interesting. So we are starting today's episode with a great question, right?
Yeah, you asked something strange that happened to me lately, and we got a great
Yeah.
question about happen to versus happen with. Can you read that for us, Lindsay?
Yes, this is from Mateos from Brazil. So Mateos says, "Hey there, I have a question for you. When do I use happen to versus happen with? I love the show and I've been listening since 2020." Amazing.
Yes, I love that. I've been listening for 4 years, long
That's a
time
long time.
listener, and such a great question because this is a little tricky, right? They are definitely different.
Yeah.
And this is one of those that's bringing you to that 99% when you know the difference and can use these correctly.
And I also think this is going to be very important because there are a lot of mistranslations where people will translate, especially from Spanish, maybe
Yes.
French. I remember hearing that from Spanish speakers when I traveled around South America, incorrectly translating it, right?
Yes, right? When it comes to
Mhm.
prepositions like that, they work differently in other languages. So if you're trying to translate directly, you're often going to use the wrong preposition,
Yes.
unfortunately. So we are going to dive into each of them, give you
Mhm.
lots of examples so you know which one to use when.
Yeah, that's why we're doing a series, right, Aubrey? So
Exactly.
tell us
Yes,
about
this
our series here and what our listeners should do to make sure they don't miss a single part of this series. Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot with happen as I started planning this. So, we're going to do part two on business English because there are phrases with happen that are perfect to show understanding after an apology. Like, happens to the best of us, accidents happen, but you
Ah.
sort of have to be careful about not minimizing something that's bigger, especially at work. So, follow business
Ooh.
English to get part two.
That's
And
gonna
then,
be a
what
good
about?
one. I'm excited for that one. Sounds
Yeah, me too.
interesting. And then part 3 will be over on IELTS Energy, right, guys? If you don't know, we have our third podcast, the IELTS Energy podcast, where Aubrey and Jessica will show you how to improve your pronunciation and to not be monotone, which really tanks your score, doesn't it, Aubrey?
Yes, and there's a phrase with happens that's perfect to say, "It just so happens." So whether you're studying for IELTS or not, go and check out, make sure you're following IELTS Energy so you can get this really fun breakdown of that phrase.
Excellent. So, guys, open your search bar now, find Business English, hit follow, then find IELTS Energy, hit follow. So you'll be ready for parts 2 and 3. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes, okay, let's dive in. We're first going to talk about happen to, Lindsay. When do we use
Right.
happen to?
Okay. So, this is when things happen to, like they occur to a specific person, a group, or a thing. Okay.
Exactly. So, for example, what happened to your sister? I saw her crying, right? This
Uh
means
huh.
some kind of specific action or event happened to her.
Or what happened to you? Maybe you didn't show up, right? That could be true too, right? You don't show up at a meeting or something. What happened to you? Did something happen? Did something go wrong? Right, Aubrey?
Exactly. This is often our question if it's general. We don't know why someone was late or something's happened. We should be like, what happened to you? And then they're going to give the details there, whether it's that they were late or whatever happened.
And this is where I've seen the this is quite subtle today, the difference here.
Yeah.
This is where I've seen the mistranslation among specifically Spanish speakers. For example, if I'm looking sad, I've heard someone say to me, "What happened with you?" Right? And what they should have said was, "What happened to you?" I think.
Right. Yes.
But it's such a subtle, it's almost not even a mistake, right? Because it's so subtle.
It is subtle, and we're going to dive into this with happen with a little more, but I've also heard someone say, "What's happening with you?" when what they mean is what happened to
Ah.
you, and there's some nuance here. If you say,
Mm.
"What's happening with you?" there's almost some, like, judgment that there's something wrong with your behavior. Wouldn't you agree,
Okay.
Lindsay?
Yes, but I
What's
think
happening with you?
broadly, the broad strokes of today's episode are happen to tend to be about a person, right? A group or a thing. Is that right? And then when we move into happen with is more about an event, a situation. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah, happen
Okay.
with is more general, more overarching, some kind
Okay.
of situation or event. So if you ask someone, "What's happening with you?"
Yeah.
You're asking about their overall situation or event, and
Yeah.
it's sort of implying that something has gone really wrong. So we have
Mm.
to be careful because we might ask that and accidentally imply something we don't mean to.
Oh my gosh, this is extremely high level today because if I think about saying what's happening to you, it's also kind of searing because it seems like there's something going wrong with the person. They're
Exactly.
getting sick or something's going on. So, well, let's dig into happen with and maybe we can kind
Yeah.
of pull out the differences here a bit
Yeah. So
more.
just one last quick note about happen to,
Yeah.
and this is very related to both of them, right? It is like you said, it's sort of less, it's sort of more trivial, right? Things that are
Yeah.
not such a big deal. This has happened to me. I got to tell you what happened to my phone, and I'm just going to share. Maybe I dropped it on a rock, right?
Mm.
Whereas now that we're going into happen with, it's a little heavier because it's about bigger things.
Okay. We're going into bigger things then. All right. So, referring to a situation or an event and something big. For example, Aubrey.
Yeah, I might say, what happened with Olympic gymnastics yesterday? Maybe I've heard some buzz, right? I saw some pictures, someone was injured, something pretty big. If I'm saying, like, what happened with that yesterday? There's some kind of big event or situation that clearly happened.
Okay. Or if your local coffee shop closes, so sad. I hope it doesn't happen to you, right?
Right.
Do you know what happened with the coffee shop on the corner? I saw that it closed. Oh, I hate when that
Yes, and
happens.
when you're asking this, right, you're sort of asking, do you know the overall situation? I'm not asking about like one specific event that happened. Like what happened to
Uh,
that company would be so much more, would be strange to ask someone who probably also doesn't know much about it. So instead, we use
okay.
this sort of overarching general, what happened with that? Why did they close?
Okay. So broad, right? More overarching. I like that. What else do we need to know here?
Yeah. So when it comes to asking about a person, we might
Mm-hmm.
say, what happened with so and so? What's
Mm-hmm.
happening with a person? But in
Mm-hmm.
that case, we are asking about an event or situation they're dealing with. And so
Mm,
that's where we might accidentally imply that someone's dealing with a big situation or event if we say, what's happening with you? But we might say,
right.
like, what happened with your boyfriend? If, right, we have some
Yeah.
reason to believe that they're going through some kind of big situation.
Wow. Okay. This is extremely subtle. All right. We'll take
Yeah.
a quick break and then we'll come back. We'll look at the difference in some role plays, guys. All right. Okay, Aubrey, let's dive into some role plays and see if we can continue to really find those differences here. So,
Perfect. So you and I
yeah,
are high school classmates in this role
cool.
play. I have turned back time,
Turn back the
Lindsay, and
time.
we're quite young in this role
Just
play.
5 years back, right, Aubrey? Just
Right,
5 years
exactly.
back. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good. All
I'll
right.
start us
I'm
out.
ready. I'm ready.
Did you hear what happened to Josh?
No. What happened?
I guess he got caught cheating on the exam. I don't know what's happening with him. That doesn't seem like him.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. Well, maybe he didn't actually do it though. You know what happened to me once? I was accused of cheating when I didn't.
Oh no, what is happening with teachers? That would be awful to be accused of something you didn't do.
Okay, so let's really dive into this here for our listeners to clear up any
Yes.
confusion. Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah, we can show you why we used each one. So, first, I
Mhm.
said, did you hear what happened to Josh? And I am talking about a very specific something that happened to him, right? I'm not asking about this sort of overall event or situation that he might be dealing with right here. I'm talking about a specific instance.
And it's also a feeling what happened to Josh feels like something was done to him.
Yeah, that's a good
I
point too.
think, right? I
Yes.
think that's one of the key differences. What happened to you, something happened, something occurred and was done kind of like against him almost.
That's true because I wouldn't say, did you hear what happened to Josh? He dropped his cell phone. No, that didn't happen to him. That's
R
something he did.
What
So,
happened
yeah, I
with
think you're
Josh?
exactly right. We say happened to when something was sort of done to him.
Yeah, so maybe that's another guideline that we wanna make sure our listeners know. Is it more passive Or is it more of an active thing going on? So let's check that out. Let's keep going. So I said, no, what happened? Okay. So there we don't have to worry about with or to, right?
Right. And there's a small thing to point out here. It sort of would be strange because it's repetitive. If you said, no, what happened to Josh?
Right.
Right. Because I've already said that we know who we're talking about. So we would just say, oh, what happened?
I suppose you could say, no, what happened to him? That would be okay.
Yeah, you're using a pronoun there. So it's not repeating the
Right.
name at least. So,
Right.
no, what happened to him? Or,
But
no, what
generally,
happened?
I think it's good to go by the rule of we're a little lazy sometimes. So we say as few words as we need to, as we can
Right.
possibly
We might
say.
even just say, no, what?
Yeah. No,
What was
what?
it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then let's get into it. So you said, I guess he was caught cheating on the exam. I don't know what's happening with him. That doesn't seem like him. Now you're talking about maybe he's going through some kind of change.
Exactly. I wouldn't say, I don't know what's happened to him because I'm not talking about a single instance, a single event here. Now I'm sort
Yeah.
of talking about the situation in general. What's
Mm.
happening with him? Like, what is his deal? What is his situation? Why would he do something like that?
And also going back to the theory of it's something coming at us versus something we're creating, maybe that
Mm,
follows that same theory. I don't know what's happening with him. That makes me think he's playing a part in the change potentially.
right. Right.
Okay.
Here I'm saying
Yeah.
if that's the case, like this was, something that he chose to do. So I don't know what's happening with him. What's the situation?
And then the next one shows the exact opposite, right? You know what happened to me once? I was accused of cheating when I actually didn't cheat. So that was something outside that happened to you, almost like you were a victim of that.
Yes. Yeah. So you're sort of sharing, you have this in common. This happened to him, similar to what happened to me. It was out of my control. It wasn't my fault. It was more of like
Yeah.
an outside situation.
I think that's a good differentiator right there, right? Who's in control, who's taking part in this change, right?
Right.
And the last one, Aubrey?
And I said, what is happening with teachers? And this we do often where we're talking about a very general situation, whatever it is. So here, if I feel like you were accused wrongly and then our other friend was accused wrongly, now I'm applying
Yeah.
it to the whole in general, right? What is happening with teachers accusing students of things they didn't do?
Exactly. So that implies the teachers themselves are kind of playing a part in this change. They're starting to become more sinister or something, right?
Yes. And
Versus what
that's,
if, go ahead,
go
Aubrey.
ahead. No, go ahead. Versus what?
Well, what if I said, what is happening to teachers? Well, it feels different, almost like someone is going after the teachers. Do you,
Yes,
are
that
you,
would
are
be very
you,
different because that maybe you're coming from thinking the administration is cracking down on teachers. So what is happening to teachers? What is being done to them make these choices?
yeah, I feel like that's kind of the main difference. It's like something from the outside is coming to you versus you're playing a part in what's going on. Does that feel?
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And I feel like the sentence in the role play here is how we use happening with the most
Yeah.
when we're either trying to not give an excuse for someone, show understanding. We're trying to show understanding for something that's going on. And we'll be
Yeah.
like, what is happening with people these days? Or what is happening with teenagers? We have this solidarity of like, I'm sort of blaming the situation in general
Right.
and taking the blame off of a person.
Totally. And then sometimes, just for another example, it could be pretty interchangeable. Like, what's the difference? Right now, Aubrey, we know we're in a very heated political moment, very divided. We're becoming a very divided country. So if I said, what's happening to our country versus what's happening with our country, you're kind of saying the same thing.
Yes. And that's what really makes happen to and happen with tricky is that
Yeah.
sometimes they do have quite a different meaning. One is more overarching about an event, and sometimes they are a little more interchangeable because in both of those cases, you're talking about the situation in general. But because you're not talking about a person and you're talking about something bigger, in this case the country, both
Yeah.
work, right? What's
Right.
happening to companies these days? What's happening with companies? What's happening
Right.
with the country or to the country? They're all sort of overarching because we're not talking about an individual.
But in a way, we are talking about each person is creating the division. That's why the with also works. right? It's like we're the victims of the division and we're creating the division in a sense. So
Right.
that's why the to and the with do work in that scenario.
It's
Super
interesting though,
interesting.
because if you do make it more specific to individuals, if you say like, what's happening to Americans instead of what's happening with Americans, then it feels more accusatory. Like, what are the Americans doing to ruin their country? Right.
Right.
So it's interesting how sort of the more broad you make it, the more
Mm.
interchangeable they are.
Oh, wow. I feel like we need well, we do have a follow-up coming in part 3 to our part 2.
Yes. Part
But
2.
we may have to revisit this again. We'll come back to it. Really big, interesting, subtle topic, perfect for all ears English listeners at their level, Aubrey.
Yes, there's a lot here, right? These are both really useful chunks, whether you're telling stories or describing events. And there is enough nuance here that you might be implying something you don't mean to if you use the wrong one,
Exactly.
but sometimes they
Exactly.
are interchangeable. So very tricky.
Ooh, I love it. So good. Aubrey, thanks for bringing this challenging topic today to our listeners. Guys, if you didn't understand something today, or if you have a follow-up question around this topic or other subtle differences in grammar, let us know, right? Send in your question to support@allearsenglish.com. We'll make sure it gets on our list. Yeah.
Yes, awesome. The more specific, the better.
Yeah, for sure. Aubrey, thanks for being on the show today, guys. Go check out those other podcasts to make sure you don't miss parts 2 and 3. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay.
Take care, Aubrey. Bye.
Bye.